Hello everyone, and welcome back to Russell's Movie Reviews, to show where I reviews of that's mostly pretty good, maybe one of the best movies of all time, or a film that absolutely sucked and should remain in the depths of hell. Now, last time we obviously discussed the 2017 version of It. Now we're going to go all the way back to the late 1950s for the original, The Fly, released on July 16th of 1958, not 1980. So, my history with this film is actually kind of. I learned about this film when I was learning about the 1986 one, which I also have right here. Now, this is the original. The original 2007 version. Or at least of the Blu ray. But yeah. I was learning about the David Cronenberg version, which is this, and then figured out that this version, that this film was actually a remake of this one. And I never knew, but obviously I never had it because the only one I had, actually even before then, I never had any. Then when, ironically enough, they were doing the whole Alien 3 stuff, I got Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, and The Fly. I can even prove it because it still has the little like postcards and crap in there. So yeah, but yeah, I got this and I was like, well, I still want to get the original '58 version because I still want to check it out. And I find this at I think it was a Big Lots for like $2, and so yeah, I was like, screw it, it's only $2, so pick it up. And this was maybe at least 4 or 5 years ago. Never really watched it until now. And now that I watched it, I should say that I wasn't really too hyped for this film. I mean, I was kind of going into it being like, okay, it's probably going to be a bit cheesy. It's a late 1950s kind of sci-fi movie. There's going to be some cheese in it. So don't expect the worst, but also don't expect the best either. And needless to say, I was a bit surprised. But we'll get to that later. So anyway, this was made with a budget of... The budget has never been really exactly confirmed yet. Some people... some sources say around $395,000, and other sources say $495,000. So somewhere in between there. Domestically, this film made about $3 to $4 million. Worldwide has not been confirmed as of now. At the time of me recording is, which is the 18th of October, which is actually going to be, ironically, it's going to be the day that I upload this. But yeah. But it was a success, which a massive success, which led to 20th Century Fox making a sequel to this called The Return of the Fly. And then I think in like 1968, I want to say, they made a third one called Curse of the Fly, which didn't have anything to do with this one or the sequel. And then obviously in '86 we had this version. And then 3 years after this one came out, this version had a sequel. And I think that's pretty much about it. So, yeah. And I don't know if I'm going to plan on covering the sequel to this one. I'm just going to say that right now. But I do tend on covering the '86 version as well as its sequel. But, yeah. I just want to get that out right now. This was directed by a guy named Kurt Neumann, who I never really heard of before, but doing research for this film, it's actually kind of tragic, and I'll talk about that later as one of the fun facts, but yeah. So, let's move on to the plot. So, when scientist Andre Delbar, played by David Hedison, I probably just actually butchered that last name for the character, but screw it, tests his matter transporter on himself, and he raids a housefly, makes his way into the transporter chamber, and things go horribly wrong. As a result, Andrea's head and arm are replaced by one of a fly. Slowly losing himself to the fly, Andrea turns to his wife Helen, played by Patricia Owens, for help. But when tragedy strikes, Andrea's brother, I'm trying to remember how to freaking say his name. I had it for a second, and I lost it. He's played by Vincent Price, and the inspector, played by Herbert Marshall, are forced to pick up the investigation. So yeah, remember how I was saying that I was kind of going into this film expecting it to be cheesy? Yeah, this film really isn't that cheesy. It's actually more of like a drama, really, not even really sci-fi. I mean, yeah, there's sci-fi elements, especially with the transporter that Andreas makes. But besides that, it's really just like a family drama, really, between a husband and wife who the husband is really obsessed with his work, which goes basically backfires on him, and the wife basically kind of has to sit there and watch this man slowly just degrade over time, which is honestly kind of sad, really, if you think about it. And I wasn't really expecting it to be really told in flashbacks, but it's a good 40 minutes into the movie, like 30, like half an hour to 40 minutes into the movie, that we actually get introduced to Andreas. The first half hour of the film is really introducing all the other characters and showing like what happened, like the aftermath of it, and then the rest of the film is basically just Helen telling the backstory of why she allegedly killed her husband, which we'll get to later. But yeah, it's kind of surprising that this. I was like I said, I wasn't really expecting this film to be told in flashbacks, really, because I compared to the '86 one where it's more just a linear kind of film plot where it just goes along actually from start to finish like a regular story would. Whereas this film, it's 90% of it is in the flashback, and it's kind of weird. So we have the fantastic. Let's go into the cast. So we have the fantastic David Hedison, who is for some reason credited in the film as Henderson. I don't know why that he was known as Al Henderson it's when he's being called David Hedison for years now. I think besides first off, he does great in this movie, but let's be honest here. Uh, Besides The Fly, I only recognize him from one other role, and that is the always trusting Felix Leiter from both Live and Let Die and License to Kill. So, I always knew him from the Bond films as Felix Leiter. So to hear that he was actually in the original version of The Fly, it was kind of funny to think about. Like, wow, he went from changing into a fly to CIA agent. Sure. Um, we have Patricia Owens as Helen, who really, along with Vincent Price, is really kind of the star of the movie because, yeah, the story is kind of centered around Andreas or Andre, but he's not the main character. Really, it's both Helen and Francois, who Francois, who's played by Vincent Price, who, funny enough, he yeah, his name is on the posters and stuff, but he wasn't really advertised as like, oh, he's the main star. But yet this and then House on Haunted Hill, I think that was called, really boosted his career. Whereas David Hedison's like, yeah, I'll slowly work up. So I always thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, Then we have by the way, Patricia Owens and Vincent Price are both great. I think honestly, I think Vincent Price is the best part of the film for me because you can tell like he's really becoming an actor of his own by this film. Because I haven't seen any of his work before and after this really, but you could tell that he's really knowing his craft when he's delivering these lines in such perfection. Really, it's kind of it's kind of soothing kind of voice, which ironically enough, the first time I definitely heard his voice was from the Thriller song by Michael Jackson, where he does that final kind of speech at the end of the song. So yeah, that was technically the first time I ever heard of Vincent Price without knowing it was actually Vincent Price. So yeah. And then we have Herbert Marshall as the inspector. I think it's Inspector Charles or Charles. I'm probably butchering that character's name, but yeah, he plays the inspector, who obviously you have to have that one character that's like, oh, you're talking crazy, man. Like, hey, I'm doing my job, and even that just sounds crazy to me. That sort of character. But even then, he's not even like that. He's more trying to be open, but also being like, well, what the fuck is this woman saying? Like, his husband turned into a half man, half fly creature. Like, what? It's obviously until the end that it fully gets revealed to him, and I'll get more into that in a little bit, but yeah, I'll talk about that later. We have Charles Herbert as Felipe, as Felipe, who is their son, I believe, to Andre and Helen. He does fine. I mean, it's kind of difficult because kid actors back in like I would say up until like the 70s really is when kid actors are just starting getting good with performances. From like the 60s and 60s and before then, it was really kind of cringy to like at least for me nowadays. Like I look back at like random example, Son of Frankenstein. I watched the kid in that, and I'm like, I get that he's very young, and this is like the 1930s or 40s, but this acting is still not that good, and it still makes me cringe. But yeah, no, this kid does fine. And finally, we have Kathleen Freeman. Sorry about the yawn. Kathleen Freeman as Emma, who is the housemaid, I think. And she does good, and obviously she will go on to play more memorable roles later on in her career. But I was like, I recognize you from somewhere, and I do the research, and I'm like, oh, you're from these films. Got it. So I always find that kind of funny. Okay, so we're gonna get into like my favorite scenes, which does include the ending. So if you haven't seen The Fly, I suggest stopping the review now, and if you want to if you don't want to get spoiled, go and watch the movie right now. I think it's on HBO Max and Hulu, but you have to get like a premium subscription for that. Or you could do it like me and you just buy the Blu-ray wherever. But if you guys don't care for spoilers, or if you've already seen the movie, basically, for anyone who hasn't seen it, there's your warning. So, first off, it's kind of weird that this film is not rated. Yeah, no kidding. Like legit, it just says on the back. I don't know how well you could focus on that. It says not rated. So, and I don't really know why, because I can only recall like one scene of like blood in the entire movie, and that's at the very beginning when they find the Andre's body in like the I think it's like a weight crusher, I think, like mechanism, I think, and like there's a whole bunch of blood there, but that's like it. There's like nothing else that's grotesque or grotesque. God damn, grotesque. or anything else like that. Like, that's the only scene of blood in the entire movie. The rest of the film is pretty much tame. So I feel like you could have easily gone away with a PG on this film, but that's just me. Anyway, I think that the first scene really like is my first favorite scene because it's really it's setting the mood for what's to come because you just see this guy like walking through this this kind of warehouse sort of thing, and then and you hear this like mechanical noise in the background, and you walk closer to it, and then you just see this girl like turn around like very like quickly and then start running away, and he comes closer to it, and you see that there's just a body stuck in there with like a whole bunch of blood spewing on it. It's like, oh my god. And so, like I said, that's the perfect. That is a very good introduction to what this film really is, and it's really just a psychological kind of drama film, I guess. It's most certainly a drama film, but it's also kind of psychological, really, if you're looking at it from Helen's point of view. My second favorite scene would have to be. Oh yeah, I'm fucking tired. Second favorite scene would probably have to be when we kind of get first introduced to Andreas in his fly form, where like Helen comes down to see him, and you don't hear anything. You just hear like foot tapping like around the room, and then you hear like the faint typing of like a typewriter, and then she looks down and you see this like note or like, this piece of paper like sliding underneath the door, and she grabs it and then she's like, what the fuck? And I think that's the same where he's like, fetch me a bowl of milk with a spice of rum in it, which is a very weird choice, but sure. And the ultimate revealment of him as a fly, because we first get introduced because he has the I guess kind of like a towel or like tarp really over his head, and he has his arm in his pocket. I'm trying to remember. I think it's his left arm. Yeah, I don't know. It is his left arm because I remember he does like a lot of pointing with his right arm. So yeah, no, it is his left arm in his like his coat jacket, and then I think she's trying to explain something to him, and then it's angering him more and more. At least his fly side, and so he kind of just like he holds his hands like stop talking, and it shows his fly hand, and it freaks her out. And then much later on, like I think 20 to 30 minutes later, she's like go through the transporter again, and that will for sure fix it. And without the fly, it's not going to work. But I think just her in her kind of emotional state, she was just like, well, let's just hope that will work. And sure enough, after he's transported, she rips the towel off, and you get that admittedly goofy but still kind of creepy fly head mask thing. And it's I will admit, the first time that like I wasn't jump scared by it, but it like the first time when she pulls the cover down and you just see that face, it kind of gross me out. I was like, God damn, that actually kind of does look like a fly face, even if it does look fucking hilarious. Like, that's why I love practical effects, because you could have effects like that, which looks fucking hilarious, and then I feel like that if they would shit, if they did CGI for that, like. If they did like a remake for it like now and they did all but CGI, you would just say like, well, that kind of just looks fake. It would just be like a CGI like head and like a CGI arm. This is like no. But yeah. And then the final scene really when as she's getting because the inspector is like, well, I have like. I want to believe her, but at the same time, her story is, it makes her sound insane. So I'm gonna have to, charge her on murder. And right as like right as she's about to get carted off, the uh, Vincent Price's character goes down and he meets up with their son, and he brings up the fact that because the whole film he's the family. I think yeah, no, it's the son that first encounters the a it's a he goes like he catches a fly, but this fly has a I think it's a I think they describe it as like a fly with a white head and one arm. Obviously, you could start seeing the connections here, and then when Andre is trying to communicate with Helen, he's like, "Get me the fly. It should be having. It should have a like a." Obviously, he doesn't say it. Obviously, he has to communicate it with like his arm and like pointing and stuff. But he basically says like he basically explains that they like, find this fly with the white head, and then catch it. Don't kill it, but catch it. Put it in the chamber. I'm gonna go in it, and then hopefully our molecules will reset to each other. They ultimately don't find the fly in time, and he goes basically his fly side takes control, and he goes basically batshit insane. He starts breaking the teleporter, and yeah, and then obviously he asks her to kill him in the chamber, and then yeah, like I said, as she's about to get carted off, Vincent Price's character comes out of the sun and he's like, "Oh yeah, I saw the fly." And he's like, "Wait, what? Where?" And he's like, "He's stuck in a spider web over at the bench." He's like, "Okay, don't go anywhere. I think there's some dinner in the kitchen." And he runs off. He gets the inspector, and they run off. And then they see this fly with the head and like the neck and like part of the torso of a human, and then the arm of a human. And you just see it's like David Hedison's face as it slowly gets as a spider slowly creeps up on it, and finally I think it does start to eat him, and then the inspector just picks up a rock and just decks them both and kills them both. So yeah, I think besides like the actual like the gore at the beginning, I think that's probably the fly head when he gets it, like when it's finally showed off. I think that's the most grotesque, Jesus Christ, grotesque effect, or it's seen in the entire movie, I should say. So yeah, and then yeah, that's my final scene, or final favorite scene. God damn. Fun facts. Okay, so yeah, this one is gonna be pretty emotional. I can't lie. So, or it's not gonna be like, oh, like this actor said this and whatever. It's pretty goddamn sad, kind of. So buckle in, folks. So this is what I was talking about earlier with the director and how it was kind of tragic with this first one. So basically, this film, when it came out, it was the biggest success that the director, Kurt Newman, like this was the biggest film, the film with the biggest success in his career. Unfortunately, though, he wasn't able to live to see it because I think a couple months before the film was supposed to premiere initially, his wife passed away. And, Kurt was full of guilt, and after the premiere and shortly before it was supposed to have its general release, he died to carbon tetrachloride poisoning. Now, it has been confirmed that was what killed him, but it's never really been confirmed if it was like it was a suicide, or if it was like I think it's more likely that in his stress and just like in his grieving state, that he didn't realize that like that it was carbon tetrachloride, and drank it thinking it was like probably alcohol because of obviously the grief that he was in, and then subsequently passed away. I think only a week before its general release. So I don't know if the film. I don't think it. Yeah, because it didn't pop up with end credits. It just had like the title card, like oh the end. So yeah, the film. I don't think the film was dedicated to him, unfortunately. But yeah. So yeah, it's kind of hard hitting with that one, and then the second one, it's not that much better. But yeah, real quick, this film is based on a short story. Yeah, I never knew that for the longest time. So technically, both of these versions, this one, the 58 version, and then the David Cronenberg 86 one, are both based on a book, which I think was published in a issue of Playboy magazine. But yeah, the the short story is even like you thought that the film and like both versions were dark, like both of these film versions were dark. Yeah, the book has that shit covered where basically it has a lot more of a bleaker tone, and at the end, Helen commits suicide. I think because of the grief of she finally realizing that her husband has passed, like has pretty much died, and it was kind of her fault. So she was like, "Well, fuck this! I'm just gonna commit suicide." Luckily, that was not used for the film, and we have a lot more of a happier note where it's still kind of sad because the son the entire time never really knew that his father died, and that final scene, it kind of gets revealed to him, although not exactly like oh he got makes sort of fly it. It was just like oh your dad was an explorer in terms of like a like explorer like scientist, and he nearly had all the he had nearly all the questions answered, and yet he got careless, and the work got to him, and it killed him. So it was like, okay, I guess that's a better way of saying, oh yeah, your dad turned into a human fly creature, and your mom had to kill him basically by crushing him. So I don't know. The music for this film was done by a guy named Paul Saltel. I never heard of this guy before, but the music is actually very good. It does bring on a kind of optimistic score sometimes, while also bringing it down for the more serious and kind of dramatic moments, and it really does work. And especially for those horror moments, it does work. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. So, final thoughts on The Fly from 1958. Like I said at the beginning, I was expecting to be like a cheesy 50s science fiction movie. It really wasn't that at all. It was honestly like a very serious kind of drama film that has a bit of sci-fi in it. And it does actually kind of work in that way. If you go into it thinking that like kind of like what I did, you might be more disappointed than I was, but I still had a fun time watching this film. I will admit though, there is a little too much screaming from Helen for me personally, and it does get a little irritable sometimes. But overall, it was a fun experience, and I am glad that I finally did get to watch The Fly for the first time, and I'm glad that I watched it for and to make a review for you guys. So this does have some problems though. I feel like especially in the middle when Andre has turned into the fly and he's trying to tell her to like catch the fly. All those scenes really until the big revealment of his face at the end, like the last act, it kind of does drag for me in the bit for a bit. And like I said, it really only does pick up when he gets when his fly mask is like his fly face is shown, and that's when the kind of the meltdown kind of begins for him. So yeah, but besides that, it's a really good movie, and I do recommend it. But it may be a bit of a bore for certain people. So and it did kind of drag in the middle for me, which is why I'm gonna give this film a B plus. It probably would have at least gotten an A, maybe most likely an A minus, if it wasn't for the fact that it did drag in the middle. So yeah, guys, hope you guys enjoyed my review of The Fly from 1958. Stay tuned for next week, where I believe I'm covering Psycho 2, released in 1983. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. So yeah, like I said, thank you guys for watching. Follow me on my social media pages, my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That will be on the end card. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. Also follow me on my Twitch page. It's in the description below. But yeah, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for my review of Psycho 2 this Saturday. So yeah, live long and prosper. Out.